Shabbat Shalom. Today we are celebrating Jerusalem Day. In Tehillim 64 we read, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we are unafraid, even if the earth gives way, even if the mountains tumble into the depths of the sea, even if its waters rage and foam and mountains shake at its turbulence. There is a river whose streams gladden the city of God, the holy habitation of Elyon. God is in the city. It will not be moved when daybreak comes. God will help it. Nations were in turmoil. Kingdoms were moved. His voice thundered forth and the earth melted away. Adonai Tzavaot is with us, our fortress, the God of Yaakov. Come and see the works of Adonai, the astounding deeds he has done on the earth. To the ends of the earth he makes wars cease. He breaks the bow, snaps the spear, burns the shields in the fire. Desist and learn that I am God, supreme over the nations, supreme over the earth. Adonai Tzavaot is with us, our fortress, the God of Yaakov. 4 holidays were added to the Jewish calendar in the 20th century. Yom HaShoah, Yom HaZikron, Yom HaAtzmot, and Yom Yerushalayim. Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day, is the anniversary of the liberation and unification of Jerusalem under Jewish sovereignty during the Six-Day War in 1967. This liberation marks an historic and prophetic event because on the day of unification, Jerusalem became a city under Jewish sovereignty for the first time in more than 2,000 years. Yom Yerushalayim is celebrated on the 28th day of the month of Iyar, 1 week before Shavuot. The name of God's city is Yerushalayim. This name has special significance and importance in the scriptures. It is unique among the cities of the world. Yireh, the Lord will provide, refers to God's choice of Jerusalem as his abode. He will see and choose this site. Shalom, with the same root as shalom, is often translated simply as peace, but it's really much more meaningful. Shalom means perfection, wholeness. By placing Yireh before Shalem, contrary to normal chronology and sequence in Ivrit, the name communicates a timeless message that all of human striving for the noble goals of peace and perfection are exercises in utility if humanity fails to recognize the imperative of following God's commandments. The city is called the city of David, but before David's conquest, the city was controlled by the Jebusites, a Canaanite tribe. Much earlier, at the time of Abraham, we hear of Yerushalayim in connection with the Battle of the Kings, from which Abraham managed to rescue Lot. Abraham paid tithes to Melchizedek, Bereshit 14:18, whose name literally means King of Righteousness. He is called the King of Sim Shalom, Cohen of the Most High God. One Jewish Midrashic tradition suggests that Shem was the founder of this city, Shem, the son of Noach. When we look at the history of Yerushalayim, we see that archaeological evidence puts the date of the first settlement of the area between 4,500 and 3,500 BCE. Those who lived there settled near the Gihon Springs because this was the best source of water in the area. We hear of a city on this site around 2000 BCE from Egyptian sources. By the 17th century BCE, the Canaanites had established a walled city with huge boulders weighing as much as 4 to 5 tons and 26 feet high on the eastern side of what became the city of David. Between 1550 and 1400 BCE, the city was a vassal of the United Egypt. As Egypt's power gradually declined, independent tribal kingdoms arose, the Jebusites, the Perizzites, etc., all of which have ceased to exist many, many centuries ago. According to the scriptures, David conquered the city by stealth between 1010 and 1000 BCE, according to Shmuel Bet 5 and Chronicles Aleph 11. He established his city in the area now known as the City of David. Yerushalayim was the capital of the United Kingdom of Israel, and there David constructed an altar at the location of a threshing floor he had purchased from a Jebusite named Arona. The city was expanded to the south, and under David's son Solomon, a temple was built for the worship of the one true God, the God of Israel. Its location was the site upon which Abraham had offered a ram provided by God in place of his son Yitzchak, Mount Moriah. According to Chronicles, this might also be the site of David's altar. The building of the Mikdash in Yerushalayim focused attention on this city as the center of worship, the place where God's Shekinah, his presence, existed. When the kingdom of Israel was split into the kingdom of Israel, the northern 10 tribes, and the kingdom of Yehuda, the southern 2 to 3 tribes, Yerushalayim continued to serve as the capital of the kingdom of Yehuda. Worship of the one true God was maintained by the Leviim at the Mikdash, while the kingdom of Israel located its capital at Shechem in Shomron and built its own centers of worship, contravening Torah, including, of course, golden calves. At various times, Yerushalayim was attacked and even pillaged by Egyptians, Philistines, Arabs, and Ethiopians. But Yerushalayim continued as the capital of the kingdom of Yehuda for 400 years. It survived an Assyrian siege in 701 BCE by Sennacherib, unlike Shomron, the capital of the kingdom of Israel, which fell in 720 BCE. In 597 BCE, Yerushalayim was successfully besieged by Babylon, resulting in the capture of King Jehoiachin, who was taken into exile. At that time, the king's uncle, Zedekiah, was placed on the throne by Nebuchadnezzar, but he rebelled. Nebuchadnezzar recaptured the city. He killed Zedekiah's descendants in front of him and then gouged out his eyes. Zedekiah and other leaders were taken into exile. Yerushalayim was burnt to the ground along with the temple of God. Gedaliah was appointed governor of Yehuda, but was assassinated less than 2 months later by the last descendant of Zedekiah, and this began the first exile, from which only a small percentage of our people returned. According to the scriptures and the Cyrus cylinder, after 70 years in Babylon, Persia, an exile foretold by the prophet Yirmiyahu, who witnessed the destruction of Jerusalem, those who wanted to return were allowed to do so. And of course, some of those who returned also came from the northern tribes. The books of Ezra and Nehemiah recorded the construction of the Second Temple. You can read all about it there, and of the rebuilding of Yerushalayim. Ezra and then Nehemiah organized the rebuilding of the city walls and governed the province. Alexander the Great conquered the Persian Empire, including Judea and Yerushalayim, and he encouraged Hellenistic culture and Greek thought. Following Alexander's death, Judea was ruled first by the Ptolemy dynasty, Egypt, and then by the Seleucids under Antiochus the Great. Under the Seleucids, many Jews became Hellenized. Antiochus attempted to Hellenize Yerushalayim and all of Judea, outlawing the Torah, among other things. Mattatyahu, a Cohen, and his 5 sons, especially Yehuda the Maccabee, led a rebellion against Antiochus and the paganizers. As a result of this rebellion, Yerushalayim became the capital of an independent Hasmonean kingdom, which lasted about 100 years. Judea fell again under the rule of Rome as an autonomous province, but still with a significant amount of independence, with the last of the Hasmonean kings, Mattatyahu Antigonus. In 37 BCE, Herod the Great captured Jerusalem, ending Hasmonean rule. He ruled the province of Judea as a client king of the Romans. Herod, who was married to a Hasmonean but was an Edomite convert, rebuilt the Second Temple, hugely upgrading the surrounding complex and expanding the minting of coins. Pliny the Elder, writing of Herod's achievements, called Jerusalem the most famous by far of the eastern cities, and not only the cities of Judea. The Talmud comments that he who has not seen the temple of Herod has never seen a beautiful building in his life. Tacitus, the Roman historian, wrote, "Jerusalem is the capital of the Jews. In it was a temple possessing enormous riches." Herod also built Caesarea Maritima, which replaced Jerusalem as the capital of this Roman province. Following Herod's death, Judea and the city of Jerusalem came under direct Roman rule through Roman prefects, procurators, and legates, although Herod's descendants remained nominal kings of Judea. In response to a rebellion in 66, Roman legions under future Emperor Titus reconquered and destroyed much of Jerusalem and the Second Temple in the year 70 CE. leaving only what is now called the Kotel, or the Western Wall. This is the external wall supporting the esplanade of the temple. At the time of this revolt, Jews continued to live in Yerushalayim in significant numbers, although many were sold into exile. Those remaining were allowed to practice their religion only if they paid the Jews' tax. After the Bar Kokhba revolt in 132 to 135 CE, Hadrian built a pagan city, Aelia Capitolina, on the site of Jerusalem. The Roman Forum at the junction of the Cardo and Decumanus had a temple to the goddess Venus. Later, this became the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Restrictions were placed on Jewish practices, such as circumcision and Rosh Chodesh, causing a revolt led by Simon Bar Kokhba, whose real name is Bar Kosiba. Hadrian put down the rebellion, killing as many as 500,000 Jews and resettling the city as a Roman colony. Jews were forbidden to enter the city except on Tish B'Av. For the next 150 years, the city remained a relatively unimportant pagan Roman town. The destruction of Yerushalayim was a watershed event in Jewish history, which began thousands of years of mourning for the city of God. The Emperor Constantine, several hundred years later, encouraged by his mother Helena, rebuilt Jerusalem as a Christian center of worship, rebuilding the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, previously a temple to Venus. He did that in 335 CE. Jews were banned from the city, except during a brief period of Persian rule from 614 to 629 CE. The Quran does not mention Jerusalem, but the later Hadith sayings at the very end assert that Jerusalem is the place Muhammad ascended to heaven in his night journey. This is not a real event. This was a vision that he was supposed to have had. This city was one of the Arab Caliphate's first conquests in 638 under Islam. 60 years later, the Mosque of Omar was built. After 400 years, Jews were permitted to return to the city and to practice Judaism within the parameters prescribed by Islam. Under Muslim rule, Jerusalem did not achieve the political or cultural status that it had enjoyed, or that was enjoyed by Damascus, Baghdad, or Cairo. Jews were among the most vigorous defenders of Jerusalem during the Crusades. When the city fell, the Crusaders took all the Jews and put them into the great synagogue of Jerusalem and burned it to the ground. When Jerusalem was recaptured by Saladin in 1187, worship of all religions was permitted. In 1173, Benjamin of Tudela described Jerusalem as a small city full of Jacobites, that is Jews, Armenians, Greeks, and Georgians. 200 Jews were said to live in a corner of the city under the Tower of David. In 1517, Yerushalayim was conquered by the Ottoman Empire, and it enjoyed a period of renewal and peace under Suleiman the Magnificent, who constructed the walls of what is now the Old City. So the walls that you see there were constructed by him in the 1500s. Jews, Christians, and Muslims enjoyed freedom of religion. In 1482, a visiting Dominican priest described Jerusalem as a dwelling place of diverse nations of the world and a collection of all manner of abominations. He was referring particularly to Jews. In 1700, Yehuda Hasid led the largest organized group of Jewish immigrants to the land in centuries, and the Herva synagogue was built. In the mid-19th century, with the decline of the Ottoman Empire, the city was a backwater, with a population that did not exceed 8,000. The population was divided into 4 major communities: Jewish, Christian, Muslim, and Armenian, with Jews living mostly on the slopes above the Western Wall, that is, the southeast. A new settlement in 1882, made up of Yemenite Jews known as Mishkanot Sha'ananim, eventually flourished and set the precedent for other communities to spring up to the west and to the north of the Old City. In time, communities made up of immigrants from Poland and Russia and eventually Germany grew and connected geographically. This became known as the New City. When Allenby took Jerusalem from the Ottomans in 1917, the New City was a patchwork of neighborhoods and communities, each with a distinct ethnic character. All of them, of course, Jewish. Arab anti-Jewish riots in Jerusalem in 1920, 1929, and the 1930s caused significant damage and several deaths. The Jewish community was forced to organize self-defense forces. Some groups carried out bombings and attacks against the British because of their restrictions on immigration and their open support of the Arabs. During the 1930s, 2 important new institutions, Hadassah Medical Center and Hebrew University, were founded on Mount Scopus. By 1948, 1 in 6 Jews in Palestine lived in Yerushalayim. Before 1948, the only people who were known in the land as Palestinians were Jews. On November 29, 1947, the UN General Assembly approved a plan which partitioned the British Mandate of Palestine into 2 states, 1 Jewish and 1 Arab. Please note that Transjordan, 2/3 of the mandate, had been given by Britain to the Husseini family, the Sharifs of Mecca, in 1921, a decision taken by Britain alone without the approval of the League of Nations or the UN. The plan for the division of Palestine was that each state would be composed of 3 major sections, linked by extraterritorial crossroads, plus an Arab enclave at Jaffa. By this plan, Greater Jerusalem would be internationalized. The fight for Jerusalem began even before the departure of the British, with heavy casualties among both fighters and civilians. By the end of March 1948, just before the British withdrawal, and with the British clearly favoring the Arabs, The roads to Jerusalem were cut off by Arabs, placing the Jewish population of the city under siege. The siege was eventually broken before the partition took place. One film that you might want to watch is Cast a Giant Shadow, which is about that period. The other, of course, is Exodus. Nasser of Egypt publicly announced that the Arab League would push the Jews into the sea. Arabs were told to leave the Jewish part of Palestine because they would soon return to control all of the land. The armies of the surrounding nations attacked Israel immediately. 1,500 of the 3,500 mostly ultra-Orthodox Jews in the Old City evacuated to West Jerusalem as a unit. Some Arab inhabitants under Israeli control were moved to East Jerusalem so that avowed enemies could not snipe behind the line, as of course we see happening today. The proposed UN plan for a Jerusalem under international administration would have been completely surrounded by Jordan, with only a highway to connect Jerusalem to Israel. Following the 1948 war, Jerusalem was divided. The western half of the new city became part of the newly formed state of Israel, while the eastern half, along with the old city, was annexed by Jordan. Jordan immediately breached its commitment to appoint a committee to discuss free access by Jews to the holy sites under its jurisdiction. Jordan used Jewish tombstones to pave their new roads. Jordan ransacked 57 ancient synagogues, libraries, and centers of religious study in Old Jerusalem. Jewish buildings were defaced and used to house animals. Appeals made to the UN and the international community by Israel received no response. On January 23, 1950, the Knesset passed a resolution that stated Jerusalem was the capital of Israel. It was also Israel's largest city. The high point, of course, of the 1967 Six-Day War was the restoration of the whole city of Jerusalem to Israel. Note the actions of Israel. Immediately upon the restoration of the city to Israel, the Waqf, the Islamic Trust, was granted administration of the Temple Mount by Israel. Immediately, Jewish prayer on the site was prohibited. Jerusalem of Gold, Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, was rewritten to celebrate Jerusalem's return to our people. The Western Wall has become the center of Jewish life, recovered after nearly 2,000 years in the hands of Goyim. All religions are granted access to their own holy sites. Except, of course, the Jews are not allowed to worship on the Temple Mount. Jewish religious sites, cemeteries, and synagogues have been restored, as has the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem. The international community has never recognized East Jerusalem as part of Israel, and most countries maintain their embassies in Tel Aviv, thus not recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel until 2018, when the U.S. under Donald Trump moved its embassy to Jerusalem. The UN Security Council Resolution 478 states that the Knesset's law declaring Jerusalem Israel's eternal and indivisible capital, is null and void and must be rescinded forthwith. Observance of Yom Yerushalayim outside the city cannot compare to the celebration in reunited Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, thousands of people march around the city and walk through the liberated Old City, where Jews were denied access by Jordan from 1948 to 1967. The march ends at the Kotel, the holiest site in Jerusalem, where there are speeches and concerts and celebratory dancing. Unusually, a festive Hallel is recited during the prayers. According to Halakas, even those who do not recite the blessing of Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's Independence Day, should recite it on Yom Yerushalayim, because the liberation and reunification of the city of Jerusalem is an even greater miracle than Jewish sovereignty over the land of Israel. Here is a personal account of Jerusalem's restoration. Moshe Amarav, a paratrooper, described his first minutes at the wall in 1967. We ran there, a group of panting soldiers, lost on the plaza of the Temple Mount, searching for a giant stone wall. We did not stop to look at the Mosque of Omar, even though this was the first time we had seen it close up. Forward, forward. Hurriedly, we pushed our way through the Maghreb, the eastern gate, and suddenly we stopped, thunderstruck. There it was before our eyes, gray and massive, silent and restrained, the Western Wall. Slowly, slowly, I began to approach the wall in fear and trembling, like a pious cantor going to the lectern to lead the prayers. I approached it as a messenger of my father and my grandfather and my great-grandfather, and of all the generations in all the exiles who had never merited seeing it. And so they had sent me to represent them. Somebody recited the festive blessing. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has kept us alive, maintained us, and brought us to this time. But I could not answer Amen. I put my hand on the stones, and the tears that started to flow were not my tears. They were the tears of all Israel, tears of hope and prayer, tears of Hasidic tunes, tears of Jewish dances, tears which scorched and burned the heavy gray stone. Another first encounter, Avraham Duvdevani, describes his experience with Old Jerusalem and the wall. Narrow alleys, filthy passageways, garbage at the entrance of shuttered shops, the stench of dead legionnaires. But we paid no attention. Our eyes were fixed on the Golden Dome, which could be seen from a distance. There, more or less, it had to be. We marched faster to keep up with the beating of our hearts. We were almost running. We met a soldier from one of the forward units and asked him the way and hurried on. We went through a gate and down some steps. I looked to the right and stopped dead. There was the wall in all its grandeur and glory. I had never seen it before, but it was an old friend, impossible to mistake. Then I thought that I should not be there because the wall belongs in the world of dreams and legends, and I am real. Reality and legend, dream and deed all unite here. I went down and approached the wall and stretched out my hand towards the huge hewn stones, but my hand was afraid to touch and of itself returned to me. I closed my eyes, took a small, hesitant step forward, brought my lips to the wall. The touch of my lips opened the gates of my emotions, and the tears burst forth. A Jewish soldier in the state of Israel is kissing history with his lips, past, present, and future. There will be no more destruction, and the wall will never again be deserted. It was taken with young Jewish blood, and the worth of that blood is eternity. The body is coupled to the rows of stones, the face is pushed into the spaces between them, and the hands try to reach its heart. A soldier near me mumbles in disbelief. We are at the wall. At the wall. We pray facing Jerusalem, and our prayer services are filled with references to Jerusalem. Thus, the reunification of Jerusalem is cause for a joyous celebration, reversing as it has thousands of years of forced exile. Jerusalem is central to the scriptures, to prophecy, and to our nationhood and heritage, as well as to our glorious future when Mashiach Yeshua will return to this place to establish his kingdom from David's throne, when he will stand in Jerusalem, and then every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that the God of Israel is the only God. Chag Yom Yerushalayim Day. It's a wonderful day to remember and to look forward to what is yet to come. May God bless and keep you. Shabbat Shalom.